Okay, I'm gonna be for an hour and a half in a session, okay?
Assalamualaikum. Welcome, everybody. Gonna go ahead. I know for a lot of ADHD folks, people will probably be trickling in, but I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Can someone just let me know? Can you just type if you can hear me? I know most of you are off video, which is totally okay. But can someone just let me know if I'm audible? Thumbs up. Thank you, Hilda. Thank you, Lena. Perfect. Um, I'm just so grateful that you all are here today. I wanted to put this on in all truth because I was hoping to prepare for Ramadan myself as someone who has ADHD, and I'm just so grateful that there are others that are kind of in the same boat. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to share a PowerPoint and just sort of lay the groundwork for today, and people will probably kind of trickle in, and that's totally okay. It's kind of there's a little bit of a buffer bit built in here. Alrighty. Can you all see my screen? Someone give me a thumbs up if it's visible. Perfect. See Yusuf gave me a thumbs up. Perfect. Well, I just wanted to start, of course, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. I just wanted to start by inviting everyone to kind of get comfortable. For a lot of folks who have any kind of neurodiversity, it's really important that we set up our sensory palette. And so if you need to like shift your lights, get some snacks or drinks or a cozy blanket, adjust the temperature, have some fidgets, I just invite you all to go ahead and do what you need to get yourself set up. We are planning to take kind of like the whole hour and a half, but if people need to leave ahead of time, that's also understandable and okay. Um, so this is Ramadan prep for the ADHD brain. I did turn on the recording, so that little notice to myself, we can ignore. So I just wanted to start by clarifying this space. Most of you are new to me. I saw a lot of there's some names that I recognize, but there are many of you whose names I don't know. And so I just wanted to say welcome to I'll introduce myself a little bit later, but welcome to this little space. My hope for you today is that you just come as you are. I know the title of this presentation has like ADHD in it. But whether or not you have ADHD is totally okay. You can be diagnosed, you can be undiagnosed, you might be like a clinician trying to support people who have ADHD, you might be a parent trying to help a kid with ADHD. Whatever your kind of connection to it, um, you come just as you are and you're welcome. I just wanted to clarify that this is a community workshop and not a therapy group. And so, one primary difference is that with therapy groups, there are things like HIPAA and privacy and agreements that we make together. Today's kind of time is going to be a little bit more didactic and less interactive. So I'll share about some more interactive options later. But go ahead and feel free to use the chat. I can see it. I might miss something in the chat. So if you're like if there's something that like is really pressing, go ahead and like raise your hand or take yourself on off of mute not if I'm not flagging the chat. Um, so I wanted to go ahead starting by introducing myself. So I'm Ramya Shanmugabalaitham. I work primarily as a therapist and an ADHD coach, really working at the sort of intersection of neurodiversity, both ADHD and autism, and complex trauma, particularly with a lot of folks in diaspora, so people who have experienced different experiences of migration. I work with folks across kind of um, ethnic identities, but I tend to work with quite a few people in diaspora. And the reason I wanted to do this sort of build this space today is because I myself have had an experience of different ups and downs and kind of roller coasters related to Ramadan. I was not raised Muslim. I came into Islam as a college student, and it's been about like 16 years now. And when I had my first several Ramadans, I felt like I had like a lot of like vim and vigor. And I used to have these traditions where I would try to read the Quran in English, like cover to cover. And I tried to read like one book around about the Prophet ﷺ each year. And I would sit there and I'd like furiously be reading. But if you asked me what I learned over those years, I didn't really have a lot to show for it, because I was so fixated on the outcome and the product of like finishing that I really lost the process and the meaning along the way. Um, I used to be very rigid about like, let me write out all these goals and like try to do all these things. But I think I had let kind of anxiety be the driver instead of a really the kind of deeply grounded sense of faith. And then I kind of pendulum swung to the other side where last year I was studying in India and I was literally in three different cities in India. Like I didn't even know where I was gonna break my fast. I was like ordering takeout from an Indian app, hoping that I wasn't gonna get GI issues. And so last year I was like, how did it come to this? Like I've swung kind of all the way to the other side here. And so I wanted to share this space with folks today because I know for a lot of folks with ADHD, there is this kind of pendulum swinging. We can be really rigid, really perfectionistic, set like elaborate plans. But often, as soon as we kind of miss a mark in those plans, a lot of times we can kind of devolve and go to the other side. And so my hope today is to really share some frameworks, some strategies, some things that I think have worked with me, and just hope that it works for other folks as well. I want to give the disclaimer that I'm not a scholar. I have teachers who have poured into me, and I will share teachings that I've gotten from those teachers. But I would not call myself like a qualified scholar. And if there's ever sort of something that requires checking in back with the religious authority, I just kind of encourage everyone to keep in mind who those authorities are for you, because I don't claim to be a religious authority. So that's me. I'm wondering if you all could just kind of write in the chat a little bit about yourself, where you're located, and just if you're comfortable sharing what your biggest struggle is during Ramadan. I'd love to just kind of get a sense of who's in the room today. Look. Sandra, I don't know if it's Sandra or Sandra, but from Texas. Howdy, welcome. You have such a lovely smile, mashallah. See. And you're welcome to take yourself off camera or put yourself on camera, but you don't have to. Mercedes, biggest struggle would be lack of sleep. Makes sense. Ontario, sleep. Okay, a lot of sleep. Uh, Preparing meals in advance. Makes sense. Uh, Welcome, Nazifa. Welcome, Ross. Is it Sago? Welcome, Sago from Toronto. I'll give you guys another minute to write anything. Driving. Thank you, Jennifer. Um, Alaikum salam from South Africa. Being consistent, especially with recitation. Alia in Georgia. Being dysregulated without food. Yep, that's real. Lena, Fort Worth, Texas. Uh, Addicted to your phone. Yeah, it's hard. Boss. Ooh. Uh, Boston, second Ramadan, waking up early enough. Yeah. Asuma, balancing the work with practicing for the month. Absolutely. Maryland, emotional dysregulation due to fatigue. Struggle with waking up and finishing goals. Struggle would be lack of consistency. Uh, all good that you're driving. Thank you. Is that Rosalen? Um, Omar, mindfulness, focusing while doing simple prayers, balancing work with worship. Yeah, these are really like uh, all struggles that I think are really normal. With the growth and learning during Ramadan as opposed to just going through the motions of ritual. I get that. Losing so much muscle and strength. Yeah. Aida, Assalamualaikum. Sleep issues and not being able to continue after Ramadan, keeping momentum. Awesome. Others are welcome to chime in. But I just wanted to kind of get a sense of sort of what are some of the things that we're sort of holding in mind that are challenges for us. So I'll keep going. So the plan for today is I'm going to kind of give us a broad framing of ADHD, specifically from what I call a non-hypercapitalistic lens. In my personal opinion, there's a lot of stuff about ADHD out there, but it is really coming from it is, in my opinion, trying to make people like better capitalists and to be able to produce greater outputs. And the way that I look at things really has to do with the nervous system. And it's not just trying to increase productivity, but it's trying to increase presence. Um, and so I'll start by kind of framing ADHD from my perspective. I'll share some different challenges for ADHDers in Ramadan. I'm going to share 12 different Ramadan archetypes. This is sort of archetypes of how I think different people show up in different ways in Ramadan. Then I'll share some strategies, some broad concepts in Islam to help us use a lens of mercy as we think about the coming month. Then there'll be space for questions, and then we'll end with a dua, inshallah. Does anyone have any like pressing questions before we begin? If not, I wanted to model a resource that one of my friends shared with me. It's in the PowerPoint, but I'm going to kind of pull it out. It's an intention GPT. And so folks are like familiar with like Chat GPT. This isn't a GPT that's used specifically to help you make intentions. And so sometimes I feel like with ADHD, it can even just be hard to like think about like how do I even like talk to Allah? Like sometimes we're so shut down, we're so significantly in a state of feeling like ashamed that it can be really hard to even think of like how do I set an intention? How do I like make a dua? And so this link uh, is going to help us set our intention today. So I'm going to type in here. I'm attending a wor- workshop on preparing for ADHD for Ramadan as someone with ADHD. Now I'm just going to give us an example of an intention that you can kind of set. I'll read this out loud for all of us. And if this is part of your intention, feel free to kind of co-sign it. And if it's not, feel free to choose a different intention. But so the intention here is to seek knowledge, to learn beneficial knowledge, to prepare for Ramadan, to prepare my heart, mind, and habits to honor Ramadan properly, to strive despite difficulty, to be patient and sincere while managing ADHD for the sake of Allah, self-improvement to improve my focus, discipline, and consistency in worship, sincerity or ikhlas, to do this solely to please Allah, not for worldly benefit, gratitude, to be grateful for the tool, support, and ability to learn, helping others, to use what I learn to help others facing similar challenges. So, in summary, learning for Allah, preparing for Ramadan, striving with patience, improving worship, pure intention, gratitude, and service. So, the dua that this GPT is giving us is Allahumma inna as'aluka ilmin nafi'an wa qalban khashi'an wa niyatin sadiqa. O Allah, grant me beneficial knowledge, a focused and humble heart, and sincere intentions. Help me prepare for Ramadan in a way that pleases you. Give me strength, patience, and consistency despite my challenges, and make this effort a means of drawing closer to you. Accept it from me and from all of us, and prepare, and please place barakah in it. Um, so I share that because if you ever are like, I like don't even know how to make an intention. Like I know I should make an intention, but I don't even know like how do you do that in a way that feels like it could be pleasing to Allah. Like this is a tool. I know people have different feelings about GPTs and AI, but I wanted to just kind of expose people to this. All right, so I will keep going here. To that. All right. So I wanted to start by giving us a little bit of context around ADHD. Right now I think we've seen like what people are describing is more of an uptick in ADHD, but ADHD, like what is called ADHD, has had a lot of names across a very long period of time. Like you'll see that the first instance in which ADHD-like symptoms were described were in a medical textbook in 1770. Um, and several years later, we start to see things like in 1844, there's descriptions of fidgety Phil and Johnny head in the air. And then in 1902, symptoms related to ADHD start to be called defects in moral control. And so I say this to say that so often having ADHD, it comes with a history of stigmatization. Frigidity Phil, Johnny head in the air, it's also kind of gendered and often racialized. Like I know I grew up and there were like young white boys that got diagnosed, but I didn't get diagnosed until I was 33. And so when we think about ADHD, oftentimes we're thinking about things in this kind of way, thinking of it as a deficit, right? It even has like deficit in its title. And so that's often how people are framing it. But I actually look at it a little bit differently. So my context around ADHD is my own experience, but I also work with dozens of folks with ADHD actively now. And I've been working in treating ADHD as a therapist, as a mental health consultant in Chicago public schools and in like charter schools in Chicago, and as a coach. And so I've seen people in different contexts. I've worked with ADHD across the lifespan with kids as young as like 5 and 6 in school and as old as in their 70s. And the thing that I keep seeing as the consistency is actually not about attention, but it's really about the fact that ADHD brains are highly associative. This means that they're rapidly making a lot of connections. So instead of looking like this, where A equals B equals C equals D equals E, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ADHD brains are instead like this like complex network of different thoughts. And so people who have ADHD tend to be able to see things interdisciplinarily, tend to be able to see complexity, but your brain is working really hard and a lot comparative to other folks who might not be using as much energy because their thoughts are a little bit more linear. And so instead of looking at ADHD as an attention deficiency, I think about it as a sort of excess in associativity or just having high association. Another key component that I think about with ADHD relates to two concepts. The first one is neuroception, and the second one is interoception. Ception is kind of like sight, right? And like I don't remember what inception meant, but ception I think as a suffix is connoting some kind of sight. And so neuroception is our body's sort of unconscious scanning of our environment for cues of safety or danger. And in my experience working with folks with ADHD, a lot of the times folks have a really high neuroceptive system. So their nervous system is sort of constantly scanning for threat in a way that's also very exhausting. It's not sort of conscious all the time, so people often don't really know why they're so exhausted or shut down or drained. But because their nervous system is working so hard, noticing different threats, they're draining a lot of energy. Another key factor is that people with ADHD tend to have poor interoception. Interoception is the process of sensing, interpreting, integrating any information from inside the body. So that's like if I'm hungry, if I am sleepy, if I need to go to the bathroom, if my sweater is the wrong texture, or my eyes are strained because of the light. And so a lot of folks with ADHD are kind of disconnected to those cues. And it's kind of like if you have an inbox and your body is sending you signals, and those signals are like messages in the inbox. A lot of people with ADHD, their nervous systems are so attuned outwardly that they're accumulating many, many messages in their internal inbox, but they're not reading them consciously. Um, ADHD brains tend to struggle with interoception, often because of sensory threats that neuroceptive system pick up, which makes it really hard to connect to ourselves and our needs and our preferences. So a lot of people with ADHD will just like forget to eat, right? And then Ramadan comes and you're like, I don't usually eat lunch, but I'm like starving now, right? And so sometimes with neuroception, we can kind of go about like not eating and not really be even noticing it. But ultimately, at some point, it kind of catches back up to us, which is why for many people with ADHD, there are these cycles in which they like shut down rapidly. It's often because they've missed a lot of cues that, it's almost as though your body has a certain number of messages in the inbox that it can fill up to. And when you hit a certain number, your system starts to shut down. We kind of refer to that concept as the window of tolerance. So I'm going to give us an example of what I might think of as um, a neurotypical nervous system. I just saw the intention ChatGPT question. I will email it afterwards for folks, and I'll also stick the link at the end. If I forget, just remind me, but I'll intend to email it out to folks. So I'm going to give us an example of a neurotypical nervous system and an ADHD nervous system. So this kind of set of squares, the whole thing, kind of from the blue to the green, is what I would call like a window of tolerance. Some folks are probably familiar with that concept. An average person who's neurotypical might have what we called a wide social engagement system. That's this like green zone. That's when we're feeling like relatively relaxed, curious. We're like generally doing like pretty well. Um, and then the sort of mobilized section is when our nervous system starts to sense some kind of threat. That's when we might go into more of like a fight response. And the average neurotypical person is going to go kind of into that, but then come back into the social engagement system, and maybe up and down as stressors hit them. Um, an ADHD nervous system, on the other hand, often tends to cycle between shutdown and mobilization. And so a lot of the traditional ADHD support methods, in my opinion, are really trying to use fear to induce mobilization. But then the inevitable consequence is that on the other side of that, there's like shutdown and blueness. And so um, in my opinion, I think the bigger goal is to widen this sort of relaxed state, which a lot of my coaching and therapeutic work focuses on that. We won't talk a great deal about that today, but I did want to show sort of the difference in these nervous systems so that people understand that like ADHD isn't just like a moral failure as, historically people have looked at it as, but it really is a sensitivity in the nervous system. Like Gabor Mate talks about ADHD as like having emotional allergies, right? And so there, a lot of this is also happening at the unconscious level. So I say all that and frame it all in that way, just to like begin with an understanding that reduces shame, because so often people with ADHD tend to internalize that something is wrong with them, when in fact, like you can't help the way your nervous system has been wired. We can certainly work on it slowly. But the kind of natural conditionings that we've had up until this point is not something that we get to choose. So what does all this look like in Ramadan? I'm going to start by kind of sharing some specific challenges that I've seen. So some of that might be like struggles with routine, like suhoor, iftar, prayer times. So missing suhoor unintentionally. I was joking with my sister, like that sometimes like you might like wake up to pray before Fajr, like to do like the Hajj or Salatul Layl, and then somehow like still miss Fajr, right? Like or like fall asleep after suhoor and miss Fajr, or like miss suhoor, like oversleep, or you're kind of like I'm really tired, I just need to drink water. So like figuring out kind of what those balances are. Um, Maintaining a Ramadan routine, forgetting prayer times, having difficulty remembering or adapting medication needs. And I think that's a big one that often people are eating their medication with food sometimes in the morning and figuring out like what do I do with my medication? Like how do I adapt this to this different experience? Um, Craving sugar at the end of the day or to kind of to fuel yourself and then like crashing at night is something that impacts people. I think there's more folks coming in and I'm afraid I'm gonna forget to let somebody in, but yes. Can I please share the PowerPoint in the chat? I will I am recording this, so I'll send this afterwards. So hopefully that will be okay, Reem. If it's not, feel free to drop me an email or a line and I can send it. Um, and so that's related to routines in terms of kind of emotional regulation. Folks mentioned this at the top. That includes having irritability, impatience, emotional ups and downs, shutdown and overwhelm, being sensorily overwhelmed in crowded spaces. You know, we talked about that like neuroceptive system, noticing threat. And so we're more likely in really crowded spaces to pick up on sound and noise and for our nervous systems to get overwhelmed and just kind of fried and shut down quicker. So you might find that like you're in like the masjid and it's like so overwhelming and that you're like, I just like it's too hot, it's too loud, I have to get out of here, right? And so you might feel like you go from 0 to 100 really quickly. Timing issues related to prepping food for kids or family members, just and that can for folks who are parents, that can just result in like dysregulation, discord, like chaos for the whole family, and then feelings of shame or being criticized. Um, there are a lot of social dynamics during Ramadan that are particularly challenging for folks with ADHD. So that can include feeling social anxiety or overstimulation at like big iftars, feeling ashamed or less than, or like you like can't get into the Ramadan spirit, feeling the need to perform what we think is like ideal Muslimness while like struggling quietly inside. And then, you know, increased rejection sensitivity dysphoria, like if someone doesn't greet you or say salam to you, or there's just kind of strange or awkward dynamics in social settings that can be that can produce increased feelings of rejection and sadness and shutdown, um, balancing the desire for worship and serious mental health concerns. So for a lot of folks, it's just very difficult to figure out whether fasting is right or whether it's something that's going to be more harmful. And it's hard to find providers that really can help disentangle some of that or to help figure out what the balance is. And so folks who have mental and or physical health concerns can often feel ashamed or like they can't get into the Ramadan spirit because of the way health impacts their ability to fast. There's also self-esteem and self-concept challenges like hyper focusing and then burning out. So going all in for a few days and then crashing and feeling guilty, feeling ashamed after missing days, having like the mid-Ramadan slump and then not feeling like you're behind and you can't catch up. a lot of comparison to others. And then for some, there's this idea that like shaitan is locked up in Ramadan. And so when things happen, it can feel like, oh my God, like this is just me, right? And so there can be like even more shame and difficulties there. Um, yeah, stop sharing this for a second. Do these sound familiar to folks? Give me like a thumbs up or mention in the chat if these are common. Um, and are there any that you feel like got missed? Because you're also welcome to share some things that you feel like may affect you or other folks that haven't come across. I just want to share these because I really want to normalize that even though sometimes we see people kind of like being like super Muslims, so many of us are really struggling in a lot of different ways, and it's absolutely normal to do so. Okay, see some good thumbs up. So I'm gonna, any questions about the struggles or challenges before I keep going? No? Okay. So I'll keep going. So I wanted to share some different archetypes for kind of how people might show up in Ramadan. And these archetypes are not like super fixed. It's not as though you're just like one of these archetypes. You might be a different archetype at a different time of the month. You may be many of these. But I'm just going to kind of share them because folks with ADHD tend to learn best when we personify things or we think in terms of like bigger picture things. And so there's the early burst worshiper. Those are folks who kind of start Ramadan with like high energy, long prayers, daily Quran. They might do like lecture series or podcasts and dhikr. But then motivation can fade mid-month due to burnout. And so the strength with the early burst worshiper is that there's sincerity and enthusiasm. But the pitfall is that there's challenges with sustainability, burnout, shutdown, and then self-criticism. Um, we have the steady, consistent person that sets small, realistic goals and keeps them most days. But they may not do everything, but they finish strong. And the strength there is long-term growth. And the challenge is resisting comparison, feeling not good enough, feeling pressure to front during like higher intensity times where other people sort of ramp up their worship. We also have the last 10 night sprinter. Those are folks who are kind of quiet early in Ramadan. They might have intense focus. They then might have intense focus in the final nights. Those are the people that kind of live for Laylatul Qadr. And the strength there is strategic spiritual timing. And the challenge is missing early momentum or feeling like guilty or behind. We have the working hours juggler. This is someone who is balancing fasting with full-time work or school. Usually, worship happens in small pockets, and the strength here is discipline under pressure, sincerity and effort. And the challenge is like exhaustion, guilt, and then fragmentation, so it can feel hard to build. We have the caregiver. This is parents or caretakers or those managing household. Um, Worship is often woven into service and having a lot of patience. And so the strength is embodied worship, like you're sort of living out your service. And the challenge is lack of quiet spiritual time or feeling like you're trying to do so much that you can't do anything well. There often can also be like anger, resentment that may be suppressed because you might have other people in your life who get to have some of that quiet time, but feel like I don't really ever get a minute to myself. There are the community connectors. Those are people who host iftars, attend masjid events, thrive socially. And Ramadan feels like very communal and joyful. The strength here is like you're building the ummah, but the challenge is overcommitment, exhaustion, feeling performative or overly responsible for others. We have the cultural traditionalist. So Ramadan in this case is centered around family rituals like foods and cultural routines, and spirituality is tied to heritage and memory. The strength is that there's continuity and belonging and preservation of tradition. The challenge is keeping spiritual intention kind of front and center. And then we have the quiet reflector. So that's the person who's like less visible in their worship. There's more introspection and journaling. And Ramadan is like an emotional and mental reset. The strength is that there's depth and self-awareness, and the challenge can be feeling lonely, unseen, or grieving a lack of connection. And then the final three, there's like the silent struggler. These are folks who find fasting, prayer, or motivation really hard. They show up imperfectly, but sincerely. The strength here is honesty and resilience, and the challenge is feeling like ashamed, discouraged, or feeling not enough. There's the transformer who makes big life changes, like habits, routines, adding a bunch of boundaries in their life, or abstaining from something that they feel like is like counterproductive to their faith. They often see Ramadan as like a turning point. My strength here is vision, and the challenge is maintaining changes, burnout, relapsing due to lack of other tools. So sometimes when we cut something out that maybe something that there's like a haram practice or something that's seen as haram that we take out from our life or we try to, but we've not actually been able to put in other tools. A lot of times, like we need a new tool before we can take out a coping skill, even if the coping skills, like the coping tool, is not like the most even if the coping tool has negative consequences, if we take that coping tool away without putting something else in its place, sometimes we can relapse. And so these folks tend to feel like they have to hide parts of themselves that are just kind of human. And then the reset seeker. This is the person that uses Ramadan to restart after a difficult year. They're focused on healing, forgiveness, and hope. The strength here is courage, and the challenge is emotional heaviness, potential disappointment, and difficulties maintaining those changes or that reset after Ramadan. So I'd love for you guys to kind of take a second. I will kind of go back through and let you take a look at each of these. And I'd love for you to write in the chat which of these, it can be one or multiple of them, if you feel comfortable, resonate with you. So early burst worshiper, last 10 nights sprinter, steady consistent, the working hours juggler, the health navigating observer, the caregiver, the community connector, the quiet reflector, the cultural traditionalist, the silent struggler, the transformer, or the reset seeker. Which of these resonates with you all most? Working hours and caregiver. Yep, working hour juggler. Yeah. It's hard. Like part of the challenge of not being in a predominantly Muslim country is like so many of us are juggling working or caregiving. Anyone else want to chime in? Reset seeker, yeah. Work hours or quiet reflector. Yep. It also can feel really personal to share this, right? Because how we go through Ramadan internally, we might not want to share that with other people, and that's also totally okay. Um, in typical ADHD fashion, all of them, as an ADHD mom with ADHD kids, it's all of it. Yeah, I hear that. I don't know if it's Salma or Salma, but that totally makes sense. Steady, consistent. I've been working on enoughness in Ramadan. That's awesome, Nadia. That's really good to hear. Anyone else? So I'll keep going here. Um, so how does all of this relate to Ramadan prep? The number one thing is accept who you are. I think so often we have this like ideal in our head around how we are supposed to do Ramadan. Um, and in reality, we are who we are. And if we plan for the kind of person we are instead of the person we want to be, or we kind of idealize ourselves, or like a lot of times I think about like when people grocery shop, and when you go to the grocery store, you kind of like shop for the person that you kind of hope you will be. Like you might buy like a bunch of vegetables that end up like rotting because you're like, actually, I don't like vegetables that much, right? I think we can do the same thing with Ramadan where we're trying to plan in a way that's just like outside of our nature and then end up feeling really disappointed. Nazifa, you're saying one thing that really messes with my Ramadan motivation and routine is menstruation. I can start with a lot of good habits, but then lose steam what's that? When that time starts, then most of the month is done and I have to get back into it. Yeah, that makes sense. Keeping track of the missed days and actually making them up before the following Ramadan. Yeah, that's, you know, I forgot that I had missed quite because I was traveling and doing all sorts of random like stuff last year. And so I know I forgot like, oh, I have quite a few fasts. I keep like the dates that I miss in like a Google Keep note on my phone so that I can look back and kind of be like, oh, I missed like 7 or I missed 9 or however many. But we're kind of a month out from Ramadan, so this is like a really great time for those who are trying to make some of those up to start getting your body into doing some of that. But yeah, I think part of that we get this slump when we get to our periods, and then it can feel like how do we kind of work back into the spirit? I know I when I look anticipate Ramadan, I look at like my period tracker and I'm like, okay, when like I kind of hope that I'm going to have my period at certain times of the month because I have preferences for when I would like that disruption. I don't know if others feel that way, but I think that that is a big factor. And thanks for naming that. But yes, so my point here is, thinking about all of these archetypes, instead of trying to force yourself to be, if like everyone was trying to be a steady consistent, we're just going to end up feeling like failures. Many of our lives, like many of you mentioned, being like a work juggler, right? And so many of our lives just do not create the conditions in which that like consistency is possible. I also think for ADHD specifically, consistency is a word that I tend not to use. I think about things more as being cyclical, like in the way that nature is. So, like, the weather doesn't look the same every day in nature, right? Like the sun doesn't even set exactly at the same time or rise at exactly the same time. But we sometimes like try to impose a rigidness that even like our nature doesn't do. So I think a lot about like how do we think about cycles and movement without being like rigid about consistency, because that kind of rigidity for people with ADHD tends to set us up for failure. Because as soon as we miss a little bit of it, it can be hard to feel like we can catch back up. The point here is accept who we are. And so here are some kind of ADHD friendly Ramadan strategies that I think kind of lean into acceptance. So in terms of goal setting, choosing a simple heart-centered goal. Like, how do you want your being to change in Ramadan? I find that it can be really helpful to choose a simple goal and to think about that goal as experimental, not sort of a rigid plan, but like just the idea of like, I'm going to explore trying to do this. Instead of saying like I'm going to like read Quran every day or I'm going to finish the Quran by the end of Ramadan, to sort of say like I'm going to explore what it's like to try to read the Quran, the full Quran during Ramadan. And then halfway through kind of inventorying, okay, what was that like? How was it to do that? Okay, now let me tweak that for the rest of Ramadan. I also think it can be really helpful to think about a goal range with the floor and the ceiling instead of a specific target. And so I think about what you think that you're able to do. I think about actually chopping that by 50% and making that your ceiling, and then thinking about 50 to 75% of what you think you're actually able to do on your good days. I think about that as your ceiling. And then I think about what is the floor being when you're like at your worst, what is the minimum you can do? So maybe you're someone who has like a good on goal and your goal is like this year, your like heart-centered goal is you want to be able to like build a deeper connection to the Quran, and you're going to try to read like a juz a day, right? So if you are someone who could actually do that, I am not, but if you are someone that could actually do that, maybe you make your actual ceiling that you're going to finish 75% of the juz, um, or 50%. And then your floor would be like what is when you're totally exhausted, what would be the absolute minimum? Maybe it's like I am going to pick up the Quran 50% of the days. I really encourage people to think about the sort of smallest goal possible as your floor, because as soon as we feel like we're not doing what we set out to do, um, people with ADHD tend to sort of spiral into a pretty dark place, and it's hard to kind of catch back up. And so, like I said, make your goal kind of 75% of what you feel like you're able to do when you're at your best, and then make your ceiling like what you know you can do even when you're at your worst. So plan for the worst version of yourself, but hope and pray for the best. If doing any kind of salah is hard, really consider like the sensory restrictions. We talked about like neuroception and interoception at the beginning. And part of what's challenging with ADHD is that sometimes we don't know that there are certain sensory things that are really dysregulating to our system. And so you might be someone who like water or getting wet feels really uncomfortable. So I encourage you to think through like where in the process of getting ready and performing salah did things just like get really, really hard. And see if you can make like a sensory adaptation within, yeah, like making wudu in the winter can be so uncomfortable, right? And so you may consider just doing the fard, and consult with your school of thought around like what exactly that looks like. But it could be as little as sort of your face, arms, and feet. If you really are having difficulty getting the energy to get up to pray in a chair, if you have to, or even just like making an intention to pray. Um, Perhaps that's the start. But the reality is there are a lot of folks that like just going towards prayer can be something that feels so shame-induced because people feel like, oh, I have so much to make up. I haven't done XYZ thing. So really just finding the smallest possible piece, and moving towards that is often what I recommend. If you are able to make salah, but focusing in it is hard, I recommend using physical grounding. So focusing on the feeling of your feet, your hands, or like noticing your breath. You can pray from a written mushaf, involuntary prayers if that helps focus. You can change surahs often to avoid autopilot. I don't know if you guys have seen the meme of like the rug, the like sajada with like the face, and it's like it's something about I think like someone's trying to do like Qul huwallahu ahad, and the rug is like, oh, don't choose me again or something. I can't remember it exactly, but I often think about that because I can get into a real autopilot myself. Um, there is very clearly a typo here, but this says tap into a feeling or an image related to what you're reciting. So if there's certain surahs that you are your go-to, like take a minute to kind of read them and think about like what does this evoke in me, and really try to like channel that feeling. I know that I was able to go on Hajj a few years ago, and that was like one of my biggest takeaways was sort of in Salah, like allowing myself to kind of make almost like a movie in my head to help me stay focused. Praying in a quiet corner or smaller congregation if possible. Um, and praying a version of your own tarawih at home or body doubling virtually with another person with ADHD. Going to the masjid can be really hard for people. Masajid are also not always welcoming to people of different identities. And so if that's going to create like anxiety and avoidance, doing something is always better than doing nothing. In terms of ibadah, considering your unique strengths and engaging in worship that matches those. And anything can be a form of ibadah, right? And I think when I think about the idea that of giving of what Allah has given to you, I'm not just thinking about like fiscal resources. I'm thinking about just like the uniqueness of your being and giving of that, but also using that in your worship. So that might be like a lot of people with ADHD tend to like to move. So doing dhikr while moving or walking or engaging in some kind of art in your reflective practices. I know one year when I kind of pendulum swung to the other side of being like, I'm not going to make a plan. I'm just going to kind of like lean into my heart. Um, I would like try to paint a different name of Allah and just see kind of what came up each time. And that was actually one of the more impactful practices that I had. Um, and so, man, I have made quite a few typos, but so I just wanted to name that there is an Islamic precedence for this kind of individuation. It's not just me kind of speaking from the place of a therapist, though I know that these things, this individuation works. What some of the things I'm going to share some of the things that my teachers have taught me. One of the most impactful things I ever learned was that the word Rab, which, what do we usually think of when we think of the word Rab? Like, can folks write in the chat, like, what's the translation that you usually hear? Lord, yeah. Lord, yeah, right. Uh, like Lord, sustainer. Okay, cool. Provider. Yeah. Uh, so each of those evokes something different, right? Like Lord versus provider versus sustainer versus God. What one of my teachers taught me is that Rab actually means that which brings you from immaturity to maturity according to your unique design. So if any, for any of you guys who went to college with me to Loyola, this is something that Chaplain Muzaffar taught me. Um, and so I know when I learned this, I was really just so struck by this idea that like Allah is really understanding us and our unique design. And it made me feel like um, much more liberated to be just the person that I am because Allah has truly made me this way. And that's true for all of us. And so when you're thinking about preparing for Ramadan, I really encourage you to like think about your archetypes, think about your strengths, think about the ways that you really connect, not just to the divine, but just think about in your life, like what helps you to stay connected versus disconnected, and then build that into your approach to this month. Um, I also wanted to share some definitions of the word qalb. So these are derivations of it. But I once had a friend tell me that qalb kind of more perfectly translated to something that like swings like a pendulum. And so he gave me this website that showed me these different kind of translations of derivations of qalb, qalaba. And when I read this, I was like, oh my God, this is like the qalb is like an ADHDer, right? Like shifts instantly, like change, turns, overturned, somersaults to be inverted, turned over, to capsized, upset to turn inside out or outside in, turn around, turn about, turn up. It almost sounds like, it's kind of turned topsy-turvy, right? Like I think so often we think, okay, we have to be like consistent and steady. But literally, if you look at our hearts are not like they're not always moving at the same pace, right? Like sometimes our hearts beat very fast, sometimes they beat really slow. This word, the sort of root word for qalb, has all of these connotations of or denotations of flipping and turning around. And so it's really not fair to expect ourselves to be perfectly consistent all the time. There is space to kind of swing in different ways and to shift. I think the important thing about the heart is that it still beats, right? It still goes. And as long as there's sort of a beat, there's hope. And so as long as you're able to do anything, to move in any way, um, that is something, right? Um, they were onto something when they stated total eclipse of the heart with turnaround. Absolutely. Someone said, Dhikr helps me ground. Some Loyola people in the house, lovely. Um, and I also wanted to share this idea of the seven recitations. I cannot actually make out that Arabic, so if someone like is very good and knows this hadith by heart, feel free to chime in and read it, but I will not. But according to this authentic hadith, the Quran had been revealed covering seven versions. And so this said the Quran has been revealed covering seven versions. So recite it in the way that is easy for you from out of these, right? Um, so even like when it comes to the Quran itself, there has been this understanding that there's sort of there are multiplicities, right? And so I think about reading an ayah, like ayah means both like a verse, but also a sign. And so I think about like reading the ayahs, both of the Quran, but of the world, and how there is a precedent for variations in that, that's totally okay. And so a lot of times people with ADHD can feel like we have to fit into some kind of ideal. But the reality is, in so many aspects of our tradition, there is space to be whatever our unique design is, to allow for the topsy-turviness of our qalbs, of our hearts, and to like recite and read the signs of the Quran and also of the world in one of many different ways. And so I wanted to kind of share all these really to underscore the point that there isn't like a right way to do this. Even if we live within these constructions and these containers where there is sometimes the sense that there is like a hierarchy of practice. There really isn't, right? Like there it's or if you always see these things that are like the best of you are those who, and you're like, man, like there's a lot of best of you, right? Um, Shazia is saying, for these consistencies, I feel so hypocritical to ask for forgiveness for sins I commit that I'm not committed to not committing again, though I feel guilt and shame. Yeah, I mean, I so appreciate that comment. It's such a challenging thing when you're like, I'm not yet ready to let go of something that I feel like is characterized as a sin. But at the same time, like when we try to change something, I often think about temperature and how if we try to change something very suddenly, like if someone is hypothermic, how do we help someone with hypothermia? I'm sure there's like medical people in the room. How do we help people with hypothermia? Are we gonna like stick them, like dunk them in hot water to help them feel warm again? What the seven versions mean? Gradual. Right. So we're going to take gradually less cold water, right? And so I think when it comes to any practice that we feel like isn't is something that is like a sin, instead of trying to change it suddenly, being able to figure out like how do I move in a gradual way can be helpful. But it is so hard when to feel the ambivalence of like I want to like turn to Allah to ask for forgiveness, but I'm not yet ready to change this. Oh, Sabra also said warm gradually. Um, can I clarify the seven versions, what it means? Is it an analogy? Okay, yes. So there is I can put in the chat this text on the Quranic sciences. And to be honest, as a non-scholar, I can't distill that very well. But if you go to chapter 3, I believe, it will talk about this in detail. Because there's a lot of different, and I'm not like a Hadith scholar, so there's different interpretations of like what that means. Some people thought it related to like recitation styles. Others kind of are speaking to like different diacritical marks there that book will tell you more. It will tell you in more detail and kind of will look at the um like the chain of narration and like all the different um potential interpretations of it. I would say the like general premise I got and what I have learned from my teachers is that this hadith sort of offers this idea that like variation for the sake of ease is permissible. But if you want to like get into the nitty-gritty, I would say I'm not your gal, but that book should help. I hope that is what I can offer. I don't want to overpromise or oversell my knowledge because it is not that strong. Um, okay. So anything else in the chat? Okay. Wa'iyakum. I thought you were getting at hugging. You could hug someone with hyperthermia to warm them. That is also true. And I do think hugging in Ramadan and spreading love is also a great approach. But okay, I want to get back to the nervous system here. Because a lot of folks with ADHD, as we talked about, you're sort of in this like frozen state. And then you kind of go into mobilization. And so, folks who've kind of attended workshops I've done in the past have heard me break down like fight, flight, or freeze a little bit more specifically. There is actually like a hierarchy as it relates to those stress responses. If we think we are bigger than the threat. Like, if you think about like the animal kingdom world, if an animal is like bigger, it's gonna fight because it thinks like I can win. If it is smaller, it's gonna probably run because it's like I'm not big enough to fight this threat, but I am fast, so I'm gonna like run away from it. So if you kind of think you're big and strong, you're gonna fight. If you think you're not as strong, you're going to flee. And then if you if you think about like a deer in headlights, if you are an animal that feels like you are like the threat is so close and you have no chance of surviving, you're just gonna freeze and kind of like wait until you sort of like either wait and expect to die or just like hope you magically don't. And so I say all that to say that for a lot of folks with ADHD, we're kind of chronically in that freeze space where the sense is like, I'm so close to threats all the time, and I don't know what to do but to just like freeze. And so I bring up again this again because I want to kind of think about the idea of threats and the associated fear. And to kind of explain the difference between an ilah and Allah. And one of my teachers taught me that like a god or an ilah is that which brings you from danger into safety, from despair into hope, and from confusion into clarity. That it's what you rely upon for comfort above all else, and that what you take up for worship, or and ibadah, meaning like the highest form of love. And so for many of us who have ADHD, our nervous systems are constantly fearing, right? And when you think about like when your body is in a state of feeling danger, what is it that brings you into safety? And in Ramadan, like there are also things that cause us fear or threat, right? Like the like social judgment, criticism or like cooking and worrying that like your iftar food isn't going to taste good enough or you're not going to have enough food for folks. Or feeling like if you're not fasting because you have medical issues, like there is like social criticism danger there too. Um, there's so many different threats that come into our sphere, like consciously. And the goal is to shift that like thing that helps us go from danger into safety from like our own anxiety, which for many of us, like our body sends us anxiety to help face danger, and to instead shift that self-protective survival um, that sort of amps us up and makes it even harder for us to kind of stay in our window of tolerance, to shift that into actually turning to Allah. And I think the thing that I find to be the most helpful in any aspect of practice is that when I don't know what to do, I literally just sort of like ask in my head, like, okay, Allah, like, what should I do about this? And wait to see what the thing is that I hear back. Um, and then usually it is through whatever I hear that I'm able to kind of make the decisions in my life. Can you explain self-protective survival? Yeah, and so our bodies are going to give us natural survival techniques, right? And so those like fight, flight, or freeze responses are natural survival techniques. And the connection here, and feel free to type more in the chat if you feel like I haven't answered this question effectively. But that our nervous system sends us this like fight, flight, or freeze response to deal with threats. And with ADHD, often what happens is that we're in like a chronic fight or flight or freeze state. And what because our nervous systems are in that sort of state, we're often not able to do things, right? If you're frozen, you're not going to be able to like get up to, eat suhoor if you're feeling so frozen, or if you like went to the masjid and were like so overwhelmed. Or if you're just overwhelmed by the day, right? Like just like fasting. you're going to be frozen. And so these stress responses are self-protective survival responses. And so the more that we can ultimately work on our emotional self-regulation, the more we're able to like turn to Allah. But also turning to Allah is like can be a form of regulation. Does that explain? And feel free to tell me no if I didn't explain that. Okay, awesome. Alhamdulillah. Um, Alrighty. Okay, I'm done. Okay. Alrighty, so that is sort of the bulk of the information that I wanted to get to. I'm gonna kind of pause here just to see if there's any folks who have questions or comments that you want to share. Okay. I'm just gonna see if I missed anyone's question or comment. What do most folks do in regards to taking meds in Ramadan? Good question. Does anyone want to share?
Um, I could share.
Go for it. I don't know who's speaking. Can you say
Oh,
your name?
yeah, sure. This is Muniza.
Lisa, thank you.
Yeah, sure. So, in terms of medication, it really depends on the type of medication you're taking. I had to switch a few because, like, there's some that just do not work during Ramadan because of the timing. So, like, let's say, for example, like, if you're taking something that is a long lasting one, let's say if it's a like Vyvanse, for example, and you're taking that, I usually take that during suhoor, and it's usually like it does help in terms of like regulation and things. I feel the short-lived ones are really hard if you take it in the morning because it will wear off and then there's nothing you can do. So it really depends on the medication that you're taking and like if you want to be up a little bit longer too, because sometimes it affects like your sleep patterns too.
Thanks, Lisa.
Sure.
Does anyone else have like lived experience or like anecdotal experience? Selma says if I take them at suhoor, I won't be able to sleep and it's too long to stay awake whole day. If I take them at iftar, forget sleeping, concerta in our case. Last year I took long lasting with suhoor at first, then eventually just went without meds. Yeah, I think unfortunately there's like no perfect solution. And full disclaimer, like I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't prescribe meds. I'm not super knowledgeable about meds and the specificity of different meds. But I have seen people who really just kind of shift their schedules when they can. And I've also seen a lot of folks who go without their meds. But is there anyone else who has like a medical lens that might be open to contextualizing or sharing from your expertise?
Actually, my husband, he just switched to Vyvanse,
Hmm.
but he would put his Adderall in like these we ordered a whole bunch of vegetarian capsules that are like delayed response. And
Hmm.
so he would just cut up his Adderall, put it in these things and swallow it, and then just work as he can. So he's one that is prescribed, but and then of course me, I have ADHD, but I have no medication. So just thinking of ways of being able to keep the focus is something that's just major.
Yeah. I mean, it's there's so many things that we go to for focus that are food and drink related. I know, like, I often joke that I have like a graveyard of cups at the end of the day at my desk. Like, there's like a coffee, a tea, a water, like maybe a juice, maybe like a sugary coffee and a non-sugary coffee. And so keeping focus based on beverages and medication, like it can be, I mean, it's just very, very hard. And so. I also just want to say, like, for some folks, the need to be able to take your medication regularly on the prescribed schedule that your doctors have initially given it to you can just be a reason why, like, fasting may or may not be the best thing for overall well-being. And again, I'm not a scholar, I'm not a medical expert either. But I do think that if you have a good provider, like someone you can trust, that like being able to brainstorm with them different solutions can be helpful. You know, is there anyone else who has better expertise in this area? Selma, do you feel like you have some ideas about options or where to go? Any other thoughts? Oh, any suggestions for individuals who get anxiety or distracted during the day while fasting and what they do to regulate that? My current habits lead me to snacking on food to help me refocus. Yeah. Would you be willing, Sana, would you be willing to share any maybe like a specific example of what time of day or what would be the like trigger of that anxiety?
Sure. It would just be like if I'm working during the day and I have a lot, like I'm overwhelmed with work, so I have like snacks that I'll go to that kind of just help me just refocus and calm down. But obviously in Ramadan, we're fasting and I'm trying to create better habits. I'm just having like more consistent work
Yeah.
habits.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like a chronic like popcorn is my go-to like dopamine snack where like I'm not necessarily even hungry, but I'm like, popcorn has like nice texture and sounds and it crunches, and just gives you like a little bit of joy. I know something, so that kind of like dope like that sort of like dopamine that you get through food you can get through other things too, right? Like so like anything that matches your system's sensory pleasures. So I might reflect on like, what do I like to look at? What do I like to smell? What do I like to hear? What do I like to touch? So what we eat is like one of our senses, right? But you might, in the middle of working, like you might have more candles around and light a candle. You might like pause and like do some coloring. You may have like a comfy blanket that you bring over. You might have like a plant that you pause and water. Really, I would really kind of think about like what do you enjoy with your other senses, to see if those are things that you can kind of tap in to feel different kinds of joy. And then so that's sort of if you're like your body is sort of craving dopamine, but if you feel like you're actually like anxious about something, I think like figuring out like what the core of that anxiety is coming from can be really helpful. And so it might be that whatever you're working on is actually like producing like a threat response in your system. So like pausing and being like, okay, like what, like, am I like afraid of this? Like why am I like, what is my body thinking? A lot of times like your body thinks that you're gonna like die when it's like a deadline that you have at work. So just like pausing and taking a break from that, from it, and just reminding yourself like you're safe, you're not gonna die. Like that whatever the thing is that feels threatening or anxiety producing to your system isn't actually life-threatening. Sometimes just rationalizing that can help. And then there's a lot of different grounding strategies that you can kind of look up, or I'm happy also to consult with folks on specific strategies like that. But there's a lot of different like somatic and body-based practices that can help reduce anxiety. But I would start by reflecting on like what do you like? What are your senses like? And then thinking about, can I create like a dopamine menu with things that are pleasing to my other senses? Um, and those can be non-spiritual, they can be spiritual, like using a tasbih, or doing something artistic. Sana, does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, there's some other great answers here in the chat, like using a musical instrument, movement, taking a quick walk or a stretch. Yeah, a lot of snackers. I'm a snacker too. Plastic knife by my desk and gnawed on it. Yeah, I've not heard that one. So that's a good addition. Um, Someone was saying that you're just wanting to hear what other people are saying. Uh, Zainab says, I discovered meds. Journey PM after Ramadan. I'm looking forward to what will help me with energy crashes throughout the day. It helped so far after trying so many others. How do we get more consistent habits, especially with Salah? Is your name pronounced Yetunde? Would you be open to sharing a little bit more about what you mean by consistency? I'm going to share a little bit more, and then Yetunde, if you want to say more, feel free to chime in. So a lot of the kind of current ADHD literature talks about like praying the fire forward. So, okay, and building the habit. Thank you. A lot of the current ADHD's like ADHD literature will talk, or not literature, but like the discourse right now will talk a lot about like reward systems. So people will use things like apps um and to like track them and like give themselves stars and things like that. I find that those things kind of work temporarily, but don't tend to fundamentally shift things. I think it depends on where you are with Salah, and kind of what your tendencies are. If you're kind of at a place where like where you pray periodically but not consistently, or you pray like some prayers but not other prayers, there's different ways that feeling inconsistent comes up. But so I'm a big believer in like understanding what is sort of the deeper thing. And so I would encourage anyone who has this problem to, for a second, like pause and just like imagine going towards like whatever is the first step of Salah in your home. So if you were to like walk to where you would go make wudu either at like home or if you're out in a workplace, and just like try to feel what your body feels. Um, is there anyone who'd be willing to kind of do that with me out loud? Someone who maybe is trying to get more consistent? Okay, maybe not. But oftentimes I'm thinking about how do you reduce the barriers towards things. So if you are someone who struggles with consistency because of time issues, something like that might be that you're actually just like very overwhelmed with your schedule, and there may need to be like a more fundamental shift in your schedule. The quicker fix is things like timers and alarms, or finding if there's anyone that you know that could be like a buddy for you, that can be helpful. If there, so folks are saying body doubling works for us in our household. Mindset is important, being mindful. One thing that helped was scheduling my day in advance around Salat times. Visualization is powerful. Oh, Sana, yes, if you'd be willing to talk it out with me, that would be great. Um, Okay, so if you were to kind of close your eyes and try to imagine like whatever is the first step towards Salah, like either going for wudu or to like where you pray, can you sense what you're feeling?
Probably I think like what should I be doing first? I think just like I think a million things go through my head of like, okay, where should I go first? Is this a clean space? Do I have a space to pray? I think a lot of my inconsistencies come from like, well, I'm in the office all day throughout the week and I don't really have a place to pray there.
Yeah.
I found a spot, but it's not always available. So then I just get be a little anxious around that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so well said, right? Like, I think someone also wrote this in the chat. I'm a big believer of like adding sparkle to where you do Salah. It's really hard if you're in a workplace, right? But possibly like asking if there is like asking or advocating for like a space that can be available to you if you don't have if there isn't a clear designated space. I think when there are spaces that are when it's hard if you're like the only Muslim in a space, but sometimes when we advocate slowly, like there can be structural changes. When I think about adding sparkle, I think about again those like sensory pleasures. So maybe the first step is like you light a candle in the space, right? If you're making prayer at home, or like having a space that like there is a sajada like always set up. Some people don't have that kind of space privilege, but even just like adding something into the space that feels like it's that it brings a little bit of joy or connection. Like maybe it is that you have like a tasbih you like a lot. But anything that can add sparkle can be helpful. But I think anytime there's like a habit that we're trying to develop, I think the techniques that are going to try to make you fearful or to focus on like external rewards tend to not work. I think it can be more helpful to think about like, well, what is actually getting in the way? Is it that like I'm feeling like ashamed every time I even like go to think about prayer because my mind is spiraling into thinking of all these other things that make me like an imperfect Muslim. Is it that like I don't have a space? Is it that like I'm afraid people are going to walk in on me? I think if we reduce the barriers first, that habit can be formed. I think if we just focus on the habit itself, we a lot of times like we're not actually able to develop the habit because the barriers are still there. Other folks are saying what helped me was the app time notifications on my watch, and I would do my best to pray ASAP. It's hard to get back to consistency after periods, so I still take 5 minute break, acknowledging prayer time, recite a dua, etc. Um, during periods or when I can't pray. Yeah, I don't know if it's Amina or Amina, but part of why like Salah is so hard for people with ADHD is because like we do truly just have like time blindness, right? And what blindness is about kind of like a lack of interoception and a lack of our bodies understanding how much time has passed. Um, and so I think alarms, timers, apps, some people have like those like Salah clocks. All of those things can be helpful. But again, I think that those solutions tend to be a little bit more temporary. I think the goal is over time developing that connection to your body, so that your body is noticing like when you need a break. And then if your body is noticing you need a break, like often you need a break around like the Dhuhr time, right? Give or take. And so, or like, as many prayers as we have, maybe with the exception of Fajr, but for the other prayers, like our bodies need that many breaks in a day. And the more that we actually do the deeper work of connecting to our body, being able to build that interoception, the more that we're going to be able to like notice, okay, it's prayer time even though like I do think all of these other things can be helpful, these other strategies, I think what I've seen as having the most enduring impact is ultimately being able to just like notice your body and being able to notice like I need a break. Oh, I should also make Salah right now. Um, what do you suggest to overcome procrastination and laziness? I think someone also mentioned uh Yatunde also said my inconsistency comes from procrastination and laziness. So there's like a book, I've not read it, but it's like there's no such thing as laziness. And I tend to feel like I tend to push back on the idea of laziness. I think it's like shut down, right? When someone is and Yatunde or Mina, if either of you would be comfortable sharing like what you mean by lazy, I'd love to hear more. Um, but I honestly think that laziness is a word that gets thrown on people for what is just like nervous system shutdown or overwhelm or burnout. And so when we are shut down, I often suggest something that's going to reset your nervous system. So like gentle movement, like shaking movements, for example, can be helpful, or anything that is bilateral. So like coloring, reflecting. Um, like if you need to like lay down for a little bit, and then there's this idea of like the 5 second technique, which is not the same as like the 5 second rule where you like have 5 seconds before you can like eat something that fell on the ground. The 5 second technique is like you tell yourself that you're going to do something, and then you just like count down from five, like five, four, three, two, one. And when you get to one, like you get up and you do the first step of it. So that can be helpful. I also talk about like the 1 second action. So for ADHD brains, because our nervous systems are often in a survival space, a multiple step solution just doesn't correspond with survival. Like if you're surviving, you're just thinking of the first step. And so with anything that you feel like not motivated for, you feel like you can't get the energy to do, I think about like what is the like 1 second action associated with it. So if it's like making salah, maybe it's like literally like getting up, and you don't tell yourself I'm gonna go make salah. You tell yourself like I'm gonna like stand up, right? Like it's the thing that would take 1 second. If it is like you're like, oh, I want to read Quran, but like I feel lazy, it might be like go get the Quran, like get up and just find the book, right? Um, I think the idea of laziness maybe comes from other people having labeled our lack of executive function as laziness. Yeah, exactly. I think I don't believe that people want to feel shut down. I think generally people like, yes, like you might prioritize something that's like not as aligned with your goals as something that is aligned with your goals. But I think what's described as laziness and a lack of motivation is really just like your nervous system is probably in a freeze mode. And I think that is like a radically different way of thinking of what's happening. And so you might find yourself like feeling dissonance around that, because if people have told you your entire life like you're lazy, or you've told yourself your entire life you're lazy, it can feel too big of a difference to say, oh, like I never was. I was just like struggling with my nervous system. And so sometimes we're not ready to take that interpretation, because it just requires us to feel like a lot of the pain of people calling us lazy when we were just like really exhausted. Um, just putting the mat out or just putting the scarf on. Yep. I think the idea of, yeah, would like to know how to handle this. Um, like when people call us lazy, so I'm not sure if that was your question. I think if when someone calls you lazy, uh, I think you can say like I'm not lazy, or just like to stand up. I think being able, I think the folks who might call you that, I think you can say like don't use that word with me with firmness. Like you can think what you want to think in your head, but don't say that to me. And it might sound harsh, but like sometimes like that's just a limit that we have to set. Because the more that we hear those words, the harder it is to build back up our self-concept. And how we feel about ourselves also impacts how we look at Allah. Like sometimes I kind of think to myself, you know, if I'm ever feeling like really down in the dumps or really down about myself, I'm like, oh man, it like, or feeling like, oh, like, how will Allah forgive me? I think about like, even thinking I'm like so bad that Allah wouldn't forgive me is like, it's diminishing Allah. Um, and so I think with things like laziness, like thinking that laziness, like that I'm so lazy that like, Allah will be displeased with me, or etc. I think in some ways it's diminishing Allah's mercy. But yeah, back to your question, Sana. I think really just like firmly saying like, don't say that to me, can be helpful. I think same you do, no one should say that to you. Lots of journaling and our voice processing. Whose voice am I hearing that says I'm lazy? Where or who did I hear that from? Yeah. Like-minded, wants to do a lot of things, but my body's not willing to get up. Yeah. Um, Laziness implies willfully not doing something, like you don't care, when in reality, most of us care a lot. That's really well said, Nazifa. Like, um, you cannot help if your body is shut down. And if you take like nothing else from this, like I would say like being able to distinguish between laziness and shutdown is really, really important. You can do things to get your nervous system out of shutdown. You can do things to like noticing your body's needs ahead of time can help delay or prevent shutdown, but shutdown is not laziness. Um, with my spirit, I do not know if I'll be able to build consistency ever. This helped me relieve knowing that I'm not alone in these struggles. It's not easy when you're called lazy. Yeah, it's not, absolutely. We've really modified our environment to help the Qurans a lot. Yeah. I think I know for myself, what has really helped me with my ADHD is just shifting the way my physical home is. Um, so a part of how ADHD brains work is like out of sight, out of mind, insight, in mind. And so I encourage people to put things away that you don't want to see, and put things kind of in the forefront that you do want to see. Um, I'll have to wrap up in a little bit here, but I just want to end with sharing a couple of resources. And feel free, um, if there, I'll kind of read back out what's in the chat before I completely wrap up. But I want to share a couple of resources. So like I mentioned before, I am an ADHD coach, and I just wanted to offer like a deeper space for folks if they're interested. I'll follow up with an email after this. I'm offering Ramadan prep coaching sessions for people if you just want to take to have like a 50-minute session to have a thought partner to explore your specific challenges in Ramadan and to set goals that work with your ADHD brain in a way that's much more like specific to you. There will be so I'm offering coaching a one-time coaching session for about like 50-60% off what I usually charge, and I'm gonna put like a code in the email for an extra 15% off, but you're welcome to sign up for one of those just directly on my Calendly. I'm also building what I'm calling a seedling space, which is a free Slack and WhatsApp resource exchange group. I'm also planning to start a monthly co-worshiping space that I'll inform people of through that Slack and WhatsApp group. And that'll be something like an hour and a half once a month, probably in the evenings, where people can just like log on, share what they're hoping to do during that like block of time, do whatever it is that they're hoping to do, whether it's like catching up on Salah or just being in quiet reflection, and then we'll kind of share a reflection and dua. To sign up for either of these things, you can go to my website, which is www.myname ramyas.com/ADHD. And you can always email me if you have any questions about anything, or connect with me on Instagram. I'm going to read the last chat messages here, and then I'm going to close us out with a dua. Like mind and body fighting with each other. Yeah, draining the energy to even get up. Yep. This discussion was really nice and important and not talked about enough. You're helping a lot of people. Jazakallah. Thank you so much. Thank you for your thank yous. It's going to end with this dua. And y'all are welcome to join me in this dua or make your own dua, but I am going to be just praying for all of us. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Oh Allah, allow us to reach Ramadan and reach you through it. Oh Allah, accept our intentions, even when our actions feel small. Make our worship sincere, our effort perseverant, and our hearts gentle with ourselves. Um, Grant us ease when we struggle, focus when we feel scattered, and mercy where we fall short. O Allah, when we shut down, please help us to get back up. Do not deprive us of your closeness because of our limitations. Let this Ramadan be a turning point, not towards perfection, but towards you. Accept from us, forgive us, and draw us nearer to you. Ameen. Cool. Alrighty. I will stop that there. Thank you guys all for being here. I'm so just humbled by just the number of people that showed up, and it's just a testament to how we need more space to share and to struggle together. And so inshallah, I'm hoping that I'll be able to continue to make space for folks to learn and to grow and to struggle through neurodiversity. I'm very grateful for you all, and I'll follow up with an email that shares this recording with PowerPoint and then the intention GPT and information about some of the other resources that I'm building. And if there's anything that I'm hopefully will remember all those things. If there's anything I forget, feel free to email me. Thank you all so much. I'll stay on for another like 10 or 15 minutes if there's anyone who wants to chat a little bit more. But really excited that Ramadan is coming and hope to stay in touch with folks. Jazakallah khairan.
Assalamu alaikum, sister. My name is Jennifer, and I'm very pleased that you did this event. Unfortunately, I was driving and so involved in shopping and things before, right after work. So I was very distracted, and I apologize
No
a
worries.
lot for that. But I understand you are sending the recording.
Yes, I will.
Okay, and if there, for some reason, I didn't register or something, I can somehow get in touch with you from the flyer or something, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can also, if you want to, drop your email in the chat and I can copy and paste it.
Okay.
Or I think my email is on the flyer, but I can take your email as well. Or if you're driving, you can also say it out loud. I know there's still people in the room, but if you don't mind, I can just take it now.
Sure. Let's use NeighborNet, NEIGHBORNET at AOL.com.
Okay. AOL is a throwback, so I love hearing an AOL account. Yay.
That's the one I used to use for all of my community work. I'm not so involved in the community anymore, but it's stockpiling the junk mail now. But that's not how I gave it to you. It's a little, less identifying.
I got it. I understand. It's like sometimes you need like an urgent inbox where like I need to attend to it, and you need to have one that's like I can send other things over there so I can
Yeah.
slowly go through those things at my own pace.
Yeah. So I give you one that I don't like. It's not my main one, so I know I'm going to see this.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jennifer, and no need to apologize. Like I think like my big motto is like presence over perfection, right? Like just showing up like is is valuable. And I think that's like I think about our connection with one another as like a microcosm for like our connection with Allah, that like just showing up imperfectly here as best as you can, I hope is also something that you're able to do as it relates to like Allah and your spirituality. And so I'm just grateful that you came and you tried, and happy to
Alhamdulillah.
send this stuff to you, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. I mean, I really appreciate you and what you're doing, and I think we need more of this. So, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thanks for your 100, Sana. Is there anyone? I know some people might like be driving or doing something else, and so they may not. I may close this sooner if there isn't anyone who has anything that they wanted to share, but I will continue staying. I am gonna